So today I'm going to talk about Mary Queen of Scots. She was Queen of Scotland from 1542 to 1567, and then she died in 1587, 20 years later, by the hand of Elizabeth of England. So I'm going to get into a bit of a background. In 1513, James IV, and along with 10,000 Scots, got killed at a battle of Flodden, 1513, like I said, and leaving young James the fifth on the throne. James IV, by the way, had been married to Mary Tudor, the daughter of Henry VII, leaving his successor James V, and eventually Mary, a claim to the English throne. So that's going to come into play in a bit. James V, he reigns over Scotland, is all good, until 1542, where he gets killed at the Battle of Solway Moss, leaving just 6-day-old Mary as queen. 6 days. Then the following year, they had tried to marry. They had made a marriage under the Treaty of Greenwich between Mary and Edward, the heir to the English throne, but that fell through. That didn't happen. Well, 4 years later, in 1547, Mary de Guise, Mary's mother, who was reigning over Scotland on her behalf, because a 5-year-old child couldn't exactly govern, along with James Earl of Moray, her brother. She got sent to France to live in the court of Henry II, Henry Valois, along with Catherine de Medici and the Dauphin of France, Francis, who were going to be Francis II. On her behalf in Scotland, Mary de Guise and James, like I said, they were reigning there, but the real queen was Mary. So they had an arranged marriage between Mary and Francis, and then they actually got married in 1558. So now they were married, which is not good, because in that same year, Elizabeth I came to the throne of England. Now Elizabeth, she was not a Catholic. She had left behind the Catholic country, the Catholic attempt to Catholicize the country by her sister Mary Tudor. But now Elizabeth wanted to make the country Protestant. What's the problem, you may ask? Well, Scotland and France, both very Catholic countries, they had joined together in marriage, leaving England alone. Also, Spain, which is kind of relevant, but Spain here is also Catholic, really powerful country. So England was under a lot of high tension. Never mind the fact that, Mary, when this one was 16, she had claimed to the English throne, so she was a huge threat to Elizabeth. But she was just engaged to she just married. She got married to the future king of France. But Henry VII wouldn't die for Henry VII. Henry II wouldn't die for many years, so she was all good. She didn't need to worry. Now, in 1559, Henry II died, leaving Francis as King of France with Mary as his consort. But it's all good, they lived happily ever after. They reigned France for many years, and Elizabeth never had to worry about Mary again in her life. No. The following year, in 1560, Francis died, leaving 18-year-old Mary a widow. She then returned to Scotland to actually rule the following year, 1561. She was no longer Queen of France because her husband had died. Now it was Charles the Ninth, if I'm not mistaken, but that's not important right now. So Mary is back in Scotland. She goes to marry her cousin Henry Stuart. Henry Stuart, if I'm not mistaken, the Earl of Darnley. They were in love at the beginning, but he wasn't popular, and then he got even less and less popular as their marriage went on. Their marriage lasted for 2 years, but anyway. And what made him really unpopular in Mary's own eyes is that he was involved in the murder of Rizzio, an Italian confidant of Mary, in Mary's own chamber, in front of Mary's own eyes. So that kind of screwed things up for him. Whereas when Mary was under a lot of pressure, she had pressure from Elizabeth, she had tried to meet up with Mary in 1562 when Elizabeth had contracted smallpox, and she was afraid she was going to die, so she tried to make good relations with Scotland, but Elizabeth's counsellors, William Cecil and Robert Dudley, they had warned her against it. Then, so that was that. And Mary was also under a lot of pressure by Protestant John Knox, who just kept on criticizing both her and Elizabeth, even though Elizabeth was Protestant, but mainly Mary. So in 1567, the year after Rizzio's death, a fire broke out in the house where Darnley was staying, and he got killed. He got killed because he left the fire and he got choked to death. There's suspicion as to whether Mary was involved in this. Mary had been rumored to be having a love affair with Lord Bothwell, even though there's not concrete evidence. There's some letters, but they've been rendered invaluable to historians. But anyway, so 1567, that all happened, which really, really, really didn't put Mary in a good light. So she was then forced to abdicate in favor of her son, James, who was the child of her and Lord Darnley. Which was not good at all for Elizabeth, because Elizabeth was unmarried and with no child, so no heir. And here comes Mary with a male heir, and she was married when her husband died. Oh well. She got parted with Lord Bothwell, who died in 1578, and she escaped Scotland and sought refuge in England, where they captured her. She did manage to escape the following year, 1568, and tried to raise an army against Elizabeth, because she's like, well, I can't be Queen of Scotland. The least I can do is be Queen of England, right? Well, that kind of failed because she got captured again and imprisoned, and she was passed around several prisons from 1568 to 19 years later in 1587. Shortly before 1587, in 1586, a whole Babington plot, is the name of the plot, got uncovered. Lord Walsingham, he was Elizabeth's spymaster, uncovered some letters sent by Mary and to Mary, implicating her in another plot against Elizabeth, which wasn't that successful because she got caught. Elizabeth was a bit she couldn't decide what to do because Mary was a queen. She had abdicated, but she was still a queen, and she could exactly kill someone else. She could kill someone else, but she couldn't kill another queen. Furthermore, she was, not the fact that Mary was a woman stopped her. It's just that she was like a powerful woman queen, and Elizabeth was kind of in the same position. But her counselors just told her, you have to kill it. You have to kill it. You have to kill Mary. And she got executed. But the whole story about the death warrant, it is said that Elizabeth regrets signing the death warrant. She didn't really want to, but she got a lot of pressure to sign it, and she ended up signing said death warrant. But then she regretted it, tried to call it back, but it was too late. And here's the execution of Mary. This is one of the worst executions I've ever read about. There's an 1895 movie about this. There's so many. There's a 2018 movie about it. The TV show Rain. Mary Queen of Scots is a very interesting figure. But here comes the execution, which is, I just pity the poor Mary. She was carried to the execution hall. She was wearing this black dress, and she was walking really slowly. She had her red hair, and she wasn't crying or anything. She was just accepting her fate. She knew what was coming. So she she was put on. There was like this platform with the block and the executioner. She was allowed to pray, and then before she um, kneel down, because when she was in prison, she had been allowed to practice putting her hair on the block. But before she was allowed to kneel down. Not before she was allowed, before she actually knelt down. Sorry. She took off her black dress and showed this red, really red dress underneath. So she was like trying to portray herself as kind of a martyr, but well, I don't know. So she knelt down and put her head on the block. The executioner, he raised his axe and hit. Problem is, it didn't go through. So Mary, I think she was still alive after the first hit. They hit her a second time. By this point, I think she died. And then a third time. It was really messy, blood everywhere, and 3 strikes with an axe. I mean, Mary, she didn't deserve that much. And it was the executioner's fault. So the head rolled away, and it was all a puddle of blood. Out of the dress, a little dog came out. Turns out the reason Mary was walking so slowly was because she was letting her little dog walk alongside her underneath the dress. So the executioner, he, as was tradition, went to pick up the head. So he knelt down, picked up the head, and raised it up. Problem is, the head fell down, but the hair stayed in his hand. Turns out her red hair was a wig. She had underneath, she had like white hair, all of the stress, really short. They say it looked horrendous. They quickly cleaned it up. I don't know what they did with the poor dog, and they burned everything. They cleaned it up quickly, burned her clothes. Her body was taken away to be involved, as well as her head, but her clothes were burned in order to not let anyone take a piece of fabric or soak something in her blood to not become a so not her become a martyr, And yeah, Mary, that was how Mary died. Elizabeth, this was in 87. Elizabeth would go on to reign England for 16 more years, with no other serious threat to her throne. The most serious one was Mary, but that ended like that. I mean, it wasn't that fast, but it was the execution. And it was thought there would be a rebellion after that because it was a Catholic monarch who had been killed, but nothing really happened. I mean, maybe a bit, but not really, not that significant. And then further on, when Elizabeth died, Mary's child, James, became James the Sixth of Scotland. He was already James the Sixth from when he was just 1 year old. 1567 to he became James the First of England. So it was the first time England and Scotland were formally united. So now James was King of Scotland and England, which was kind of what Mary wanted all along, but she never got to see her son do that. Just kind of sad. I just really feel terrible for Mary. I don't think she deserved that much. She had disastrous luck. Her marriage with Francis, they were in love. There's really sweet tales about them, but he died really quickly. Lord Darnley, that was a failure. I don't think she deserved that horrible execution. Just because the whole power in the 16th century, Europe, England, Scotland, if people stopped being so power hungry, things like this would not happen. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's the execution, like the life, the short version. Maybe I'll do a longer video, but that the short version of Mary Queen of Scots and her execution. One of the worst ones in history, I think. Not most brutal ones, but most disastrous ones. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching.